From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Tonight on Cronkite News, we're speaking with migrants and church volunteers in El Paso, finding out how they are dealing with the increase of migrant families seeking asylum in their city.
Ready to work, Arizona makes history as Governor Doug Ducey signs a bill making the state the first to recognize out-of-state occupational licenses.
And get ready for round 2 of breezes as another storm system is going to be pushing in for the later half of your week. I'll break down all those details coming up in just minutes.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Eliav Gabay.
And I'm Imani Stevens. Thank you for joining us.
According to officials, El Paso, Texas is seeing a large, seemingly unmanageable influx of migrants. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says they've seen just over a 1,600% increase in the number of families apprehended within this fiscal year at the city's port of entry.
Local bus stations and churches have become transitional locations for many of them throughout several southern U.S. cities. Reporter Austin Westfall was in El Paso and got a first-hand look at the situation. Austin?
Yeah, El Paso has become a significant example of why U.S. officials say the country's immigration system is at its breaking point.
Now we have to rush to the bus stop.
Israel Cabrera is the associate pastor of Caminos de Vida, a church in El Paso taking in migrants after Immigration and Customs Enforcement drops them off.
Dina Lopez.
He's spending part of his day shuttling 14 people to the local airport and Greyhound bus station.
They were overwhelmed with joy. Someone said, this happiness that we feel is priceless.
It wasn't easy. We were very cold and always hungry. The food isn't good and it was very limited. Thank God that we are here.
Cabrera said the 14 people were part of a group of about 90 that ICE dropped off at his church a few nights before. All the migrants were once held in the same area seen in these photos. Dozens of them, including children, were housed behind a razor-wired fence under a bridge near Customs and Border Protection. The image is going viral and inciting public outcry.
Many of them said, tonight we no longer sleep on the rocks, we no longer sleep in dirt, we have a bed.
This has scarred our lives, our minds, and at times we suffer for our kids, for something better for them. And I come from Honduras, and the situation of my country is not good, and that's why we looked for something better.
But officials say the large number of people looking for something better is causing a crisis at the southern border.
And nowhere has that crisis manifested more acutely than here in El Paso.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin K. McAleenan saying at a press conference last month that almost 3,500 migrants were in custody in the city that morning. Their facilities are designed to hold much less than that.
We had over 1,000 apprehensions in this one sector alone on Monday and encounters at our port of entry. The vast majority, again, families from Central America.
Many families like Castillo's are now en route to other U.S. cities courtesy of a sponsor. But not every migrant family has a ticket out of El Paso. This group of migrants was dropped off at the Greyhound bus station around 8:30 one night. Greyhound employees would not allow anyone to stay inside if they did not have a bus ticket. It's 56 degrees out here. Children are cold, and volunteers like this are showing up and they're helping out any way they can. That volunteer giving a hug is Doris Reamer.
I brought some bags that have like tarps and socks and a little bit of food.
She isn't affiliated with any activist group, church, or government agency. She says she simply came to help those in need.
I went back in and asked if they could please go back in because it's so cold. For the kids, it's cold.
Reamer was hoping church volunteers would eventually come and provide the families with a place to sleep at night, but that hadn't happened by the time our team left the area. Why do you do what you do?
Because we're all brothers and sisters. We're children of God. For love.
This administration wants to undermine due process for migrants as much as they can.
Robert Hyman is the policy director for Border Network for Human Rights, an El Paso group that advocates for immigration policy change. He says BNHR is working with local lawmakers on policies to increase personnel at ports of entry and promote transparency among agencies like ICE and Customs and Border Protection.
If we're able to restore the asylum system to the way that it should be working, that it was designed to work, and we're able to make CBP and ICE and this administration put a greater prominence on treating people humanely, then we'll have made real progress.
The only way to fundamentally address these flows is for Congress to act and to reinstate integrity into our immigration system.
Now, by March 2018, CBP's El Paso sector had apprehended about 3,000 migrant families. By the same time this year, that number is already over 53,000. Since that press conference with McAleenan, President Trump has named him the acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, replacing Kirstjen Nielsen, who left the position Sunday. In the studio, Austin Westfall, Cronkite News.
A new migrant caravan is making its way to the United States. Several hundred migrants from Honduras are making their way to Guatemala, and they plan to reach the United States. Many are families with young children who say they can't support their families. Most boarded buses to take them to the Guatemalan border, but others walk through the rain. A project to change fencing along the U.S.-Mexico border just got nearly $1 billion in funding. The Army Corps of Engineers awarded contracts to removal vehicle fencing and replace it with pedestrian fencing along the border near Yuma and Columbus, New Mexico. The Corps says the new fencing will help impede and deny illegal border crossings and smuggling of drugs and humans. The president's proposed 2020 federal budget includes heavy cuts to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Cronkite News reporter Hattie Meyer went to the border to speak with the conservationists about what those cuts might mean for the wildlife that lives in the Sonoran Desert.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service faces a $267 million cut under the president's budget proposal. The budget also includes billions of dollars to build a wall along the southern border. Environmentalists from the Center for Biological Diversity worry the potential agency cuts, coupled with increased funding for a wall, might devastate the wildlife that lives along the border.
The Sonoran Desert is the quiet home to many of Arizona's indigenous species. But that silence has given way to the sounds of barrier construction along the Arizona border.
You know, it's beautiful, and you have that feeling that there's wildlife here. And then you see that border wall.
Conservationists like Saraglio say they're worried about the potential impact a new border wall would have on these already fragile lands. Their concern is growing as U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which manages most of these lands, falls under the umbrella of the Department of Interior. It's facing a potential cut which would bring it down from $14.5 billion to $12.5 billion.
It's not like a city. You put up a border wall here and it has all kinds of really serious and damaging impacts on wildlife.
According to a study done by the Center for Biological Diversity, these cuts would slash funding that would go into restoring endangered populations. Conservationists worry that money would instead go towards building the proposed new border wall.
If this wall were to be completed through that area, it would totally eliminate this wildlife corridor for jaguars.
Saraglio says barriers like barbed wire fences pose little threat to wildlife, but the steel bars that line parts of the U.S.-Mexico border are a different story.
As you can see, the gaps in this fence are barely big enough for me to fit my arm through, meaning animals such as Mexican wolves and jaguars, which migrate across the border, can't make it through.
According to Saraglio, many other mammals also rely on crossing the border for access to resources, territory, and mates.
It affects genetic diversity in populations. It affects animals' ability to get to water sources and food sources that they need, especially on a seasonal basis.
But Jim DeVos, Assistant Director for Arizona Game and Fish, says plans for the new border wall would take into account the wildlife that lives in these areas.
The president and his staff have said that the building of a border barrier doesn't indicate that it's a complete block to the entire border, and that there are ways that if they're identified as important wildlife corridors can be managed with intense electronic monitoring.
Until that happens, advocates like Saraglio say trying to preserve these lands is key in making sure the animals who call them home have a chance to survive.
I wish I could bring everybody in the United States, one at a time, up here to look at these rugged hills and look at this landscape and just feel it. I think if that were the case, then we wouldn't have a border wall.
President Donald Trump previously demanded $5.7 billion for a border wall, which Congress denied. His new budget requests $8.6 billion for the same wall. In the broadcast center, Hattie Meyer, Cronkite News.
Senator Martha McSally is calling for better management of Arizona's forests as we head into fire season. The Republican senator sits on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. McSally requested Forest Service Chief Vicki Christensen visit Arizona to see the issue with forest growth. McSally also discussed what she called disappointing efforts in Phase 1 of the Forest Restoration Initiative, which only cleared 11,000 acres.
We hope that you all will learn from the mistakes made in Phase 1 and award a contract that will expeditiously remove the low-value timber from our fire-prone forests.
I am deeply committed to the innovations, and it can't be business as usual if we're going to get in front of the big needs that we need to do to create better conditions on the land.
Christensen went on to say that they hope to look at new proposals in June. Speaking of fire, Jordan, these winds are making me worried.
Yeah, I heard Phoenix and Tucson are within some of the red flag warning areas. Is that going to continue for the rest of the week?
So yeah, red flag warnings, they're going to expire later tonight, but those winds, because of the tight pressure gradient, thanks to that cold front that came through last night, we've been dealing with gusts up to 35 miles an hour. In fact, Sky Harbor had a gust of 41 earlier this afternoon. You can see that flag out here in the distance outside our Cronkite News studio. Those winds are still pretty gusty. In fact, temperatures down into the 70s. Yesterday, we topped out at 97, and today we didn't even crack 80 degrees. And then, along with that cold front, dew points have fallen into the single digits, and those winds, again, pretty strong, up at 26 miles an hour. So those are all the perfect ingredients to get fire conditions here across the state. There's the cold front and all these brown shadings. That's the cold and the drier air, and it's going to stay here all the way through this overnight hours and into tomorrow. So again, red flag warnings expiring at 7 p.m. tonight, but because of those winds will remain strong throughout the day tomorrow, fire danger is still a possibility across southern Arizona. So a couple things to keep in mind: avoid using fireworks and campfires, don't drive over grassy areas, and make sure you're stowing those trailer chains away properly. And the biggest thing is to obey any burn bans in your area, just because it does not take much to spark a fire in these dry conditions. Now, coming up in your forecast, we're going to talk about those temperatures. We're going to ride these 70s out all the way through the weekend. We'll dive into all those details coming up in just minutes.
While fire is a worry in a drought-stricken state like Arizona, so is water.
But a multi-state plan to help preserve the state's water resources is one step closer to final approval in Washington today. Flanked by several Arizona lawmakers, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan earlier today. The plan, which still has to be signed by the president, has been years in the making. It determines how 7 states that draw on the river will divide up the water if Lake Mead levels drop. The pact only runs for 11 years before it has to be renegotiated. Arizona made history today with the signing of House Bill 2569, a bill the governor says will lead the charge for economic freedom. House Bill 2569 was signed by Governor Doug Ducey. It will allow people with occupational licenses from other states to be able to use them when they move to Arizona. Governor Ducey pegged the bill an Arizona original, though some House members openly oppose the bill, saying it isn't a fair trade for Arizonans.
The issue, though, is, are we sure that we're getting quality as well? That's something that we would lose local control on. So if there were a problem with somebody who had a license from out of state, how are you going to address that problem here in Arizona?
We have jobs that can't be filled. We have houses that can't be framed. We have drywall that can't be hung. This is going to allow people to come into our state, and where there are occupational licenses that are stopping them from getting those positions, they'll be able to come in and work.
Ducey says the bill could become a model for the rest of the country on unleashing economic opportunities.
A bill that would take people off of Arizona's permanent early voting list is getting pushback from the community. Reporter Nicole Hernandez shows us how one group is making sure the representatives know where they stand.
Tell your state representative to vote no.
Indivisible ASU members got together to call their state representatives.
Hi, can I speak to Isla LeBlanc?
Asking them to vote no on a bill that would take inactive voters off of Arizona's permanent early voting list.
I would not be removed by this, but there's no point to having a permanent early voting list if it's not permanent.
There are over 1.5 million Arizonans that currently receive early voting ballots every election. Let's say that list of people is this pile of 100 coins. If the bill were to pass, it would take out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coins from the pile. The bill passed through the Senate in early March with a 16-14 vote.
You have passed Senate Bill 1188.
It would take off any voters who have not turned in early ballots for the last 2 elections. While the bill is passing through the legislature, there are a lot of groups against the move.
Any voter suppression, regardless of your party that you vote for, is like completely undemocratic.
In Tempe, Nicole Hernandez, Cronkite News.
The bill has passed House committees, but has not yet had a full vote on the House floor. Vice President Mike Pence is set to visit Nogales, Arizona tomorrow. According to the White House, he will arrive at 1:25. After that, he will head to Nogales and be briefed by Customs and Border Protection agents and tour the border wall. The trip comes amid controversy surrounding the departure of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. Pence supports Trump's immigration efforts, saying last month at a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Atlanta that there is a crisis on our southern border. Coming up next, details on the new steps being taken here in Arizona to help end the opioid epidemic.
And how our state is partnering with medical schools to better educate future doctors.
Stay in the know on the go. At Cronkite News, we work hard to report the facts and keep you updated, whether we're on set or on the scene.
Taking it from the studio to the field. So I'm here in South Phoenix.
In Phoenix, we're just a click away. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or find us online at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff, anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
The Arizona Department of Health Services is working to combat the opioid epidemic across the state, taking new measures to find solutions.
Cronkite News reporter Bryce Newberry joins us live with a look at the progress so far.
Imani Eliav, the state recently released a report about the progress made in 2018. We've been digging into the numbers, and these are some of the big ones. 1,375 suspected overdose deaths in Arizona in 2018, and 9,335 suspected overdoses last year. Now, 91% of those deaths were right here in Maricopa County. One way, of course, to stop an opioid overdose is with naloxone. Pharmacists in Arizona dispensed nearly 28,000 doses in 2018. And a couple of other stats that are interesting. 35% of people who had a suspected overdose were prescribed by 10 or more providers, and 26% of those people who had a suspected overdose last year had 20 or more prescriptions filled. This morning, we sat down with the state health department's leader of the opioid epidemic response. It turns out only about 38% of prescribers are following state law to check the state's controlled substances prescription monitoring system before prescribing opioids. But the state health department's assistant director says Arizona is a leader nationally in terms of responding to the epidemic.
The response that we put forward was a significant leap forward with a substantial amount of action occurring in a short period of time.
The state has come up with several solutions, like a hotline for people struggling with opioid addiction and increased access to naloxone.
Our efforts have been tremendous. We mustn't let up on that effort at all. We still are seeing an increase in overdoses and deaths, and that may be the case, unfortunately, for a while yet.
But for now, another element of the state's response is a curriculum for Arizona medical students.
This is landmark curriculum.
The state included schools across Arizona to create the curriculum, including Charlotte Thrall from ASU's College of Nursing and Health Innovation.
The goals were to effectively equip our students when they graduate to be able to appropriately treat acute and chronic pain issues, as well as treat substance use disorder. This is a crisis that our graduate students need to be prepared to intervene in.
Jessica Wagner is one of those students.
It goes back to the basics, like let's try ibuprofen, let's try Tylenol first, let's try physical therapy, let's try like biofeedback, let's try acupuncture.
Those basics are skills she plans to take into her career.
Graduating in 2019 as a prescriber and provider, I think I have a fresh view, fresh eyes on the opioid crisis, but coming out with an entirely new view and perspective on addiction and pain, I think is hugely beneficial.
The state held a curriculum training for medical school faculties late last year and plans to create a continuing education version of the same curriculum for professionals. Live in the Broadcast Center, Bryce Newberry, Cronkite News.
Scientists released the first ever picture of a black hole today.
National Science Foundation researchers actually took the photo 2 years ago. This black hole is at the center of a galaxy called M87, about 54 million light years away, which was discovered in 1781. To capture the image, scientists combined the power of 8 radio telescopes that are a part of the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration. That involved creating a virtual telescope which in physical form would be around the size of Earth.
It's incredible. Wow.
Wow.
Yes.
Seriously. And while it's the first ever picture of a black hole, it seems like it's been a while since we've seen those 90s, Jordan.
Oh, yeah. In fact, the 90s came back for the first time this year on Monday. We topped out at 97 on Monday, Tuesday, and our average first 97 degrees is April 19th. So we were way ahead of schedule on that. And let's take you outside right now because that cold front that came through last night, boy, you did pick up those winds and drop those temperatures. There's a flag blowing in the distance here in downtown Phoenix, and those gusts are going to remain high. In fact, gusts just updated at Sky Harbor. We've seen a gust at Sky Harbor come at 46 miles an hour. So a pretty windy day across the valley today. And that's going to continue to be the case later tonight. Those temperatures only in the 70s, not even topping 80 today. Along with those drop in temperatures have been a drop in the dew points, which means humidity levels are low and those winds are high. So that's why fire danger is going to remain a threat throughout the rest of the evening today. Let's talk about those winds for the rest of the night. Down here in the southeast, Safford and down through Douglas is where those winds will remain the highest. Gusts up to 50 miles an hour possible down there. They will back off later tonight, but those winds will increase once again tomorrow, and we'll keep those breezes here in the valley with gusts up to 20 to 25 miles per hour. Just a bit lighter than what we saw today, but still a pretty breezy day. Now those winds will back off as we head into the weekend, and they'll stay pretty calm throughout the weekend as well. So let's talk about futurecast. We've got another storm system coming in and another cold front as the short wave is going to push in Thursday night into Friday, which will help increase those rain and snow chances as early as Friday. Snow levels up in the high country dropping down to about 6,000 feet once that storm system gets over us. Now it's going to quickly move out of here. Only a couple of inches expected up there in Flagstaff and along the rim. Another weak high pressure is going to build in for Saturday into Sunday, which will send those temperatures back up into the 80s. But we will ride those 70s out for the next couple of days. Let's track it out for you tomorrow. 56 at 7 a.m. We'll go with 67 at 10, up into the 70s by noon, topping out at 77 between 3 and 5 p.m. tomorrow. And again, those clouds increasing throughout the day. Across the state, we'll see 60s for all the central lower desert spots, 25 up in Flagstaff and down along the rim. High temperatures up there only making it into the low 50s. We'll see 63 up in Sedona, 79 here in the Valley of the Sun, and 73 degrees down in Tucson as well. And as we track it out for you for the next 7 days, I'm going to go with a 20% chance on Friday, a slight chance for a thunderstorm as well, as instability could be pretty decent on Friday. Back up to the 80s on Saturday and Sunday, and we'll stay clear of the 90s heading into next week as another cold front pushes through. Mid next week, we'll see those temperatures fall back down into the low 80s on Tuesday.
The Phoenix Suns season is over after finishing with just 19 wins.
Coming up next, we hear from star Devin Booker reflecting on the season and discussing the team's future.
With wildfires, a scarcity of water, and other environmental issues facing the Earth today, it's critical to stay up to date with local impacts of a changing climate. That's why we created Elemental, covering sustainability, a multimedia collaboration between public television and radio stations. From climate change to water conservation to renewable energy and much more, Elemental covers the latest in sustainability news. Find our stories on our website, elementalreports.com.
By the year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Before Professor Halden, I had an insane amount of passion, but I almost felt helpless because I didn't know how to use it. Professor Halden gave me a chance to make a difference. Being at a place like ASU allows you to take these big leaps. Ultimately, the biggest problems in the world cannot be solved alone.
The 2017-18 Phoenix Suns season saw the team finish with a 21-61 record. That was the worst in the NBA. But as Cronkite News reporter Bailey O'Carroll tells us, this season, which is now ending, wasn't that much better.
Eliav, the team finished with a record of they won only 19 games. And while it was the worst record in the Western Conference, it wasn't the worst record in the NBA. The New York Knicks took that title home. And I feel like a broken record here, but the Phoenix Suns will miss the playoffs for the 9th straight year. It was a season of ups and downs, but the one bright spot, the play of Devin Booker, who appears to be in it for the long haul.
You know, as I always say, the love has been unconditional since I've been here, since day one. You know, I see the fans that support this franchise and how much they love this franchise. And I want to be part of that, you know, the kind of the revenge tour of getting back to where we're supposed to be.
Devin, along with DeAndre Ayton, hope to lead the Suns to a brighter future next season. Live in the Broadcast Center, Bailey O'Carroll, Cronkite News.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, Republican lawmakers discuss the demise of a Republican lawmaker's bill to lower the minimum wage for students. And we'll hear about ways to stay creative in good times and in bad.
I'm William Brangham. We came to Antarctica because this area is losing ice 3 times faster than what anyone previously thought. What that means for coastal communities all over the world. That's on the next PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.